in the W, it's a smaller league, less teams. The talent level from 1 to 12 on the roster is higher. I mean, heck, you have top round rookies getting cut before they even play. Like, it's an extremely competitive league, and there's not a lot of spots there. So people play really hard.
Get that stuff out of here. It's Southwest Bias.
Hello, welcome into a revamped version of Southwest Bias. I am Erik Ruby alongside Bo Brock and Greg Esposito, also known as Espo. Can I go with the full name for you? This is more formal here.
First off, who the hell is Greg Esposito? I don't know that. And could we have found a whiter panel for this? Like, there's not even.
I promise you, we could.
Different pigment. I think it's.
Oh no, there is, and I'm whiter than both of you.
Like Casper and then slightly darker Casper.
Nothing screams Southwest and Southwest Bias. Like,
I mean, just Eric's legs alone.
Yeah, the legs are
translucent bias.
All right, guys. Well,
hot start so far.
Yeah, we're off to a good start. I think
it
started when I called him Greg. All things were off the rails there. All right, guys. Listen, we are going to bring you guys a little bit of a debate format and a different, less live show format as well. So today's topic, coming from the one and only Bo Brock, talking about Diana Taurasi and Caitlin Clark. Now, obviously, Caitlin Clark, massive news in the WNBA. A lot of people are saying she's being treated unfairly, getting fouled, and a little welcome to the league moment. And my question to you guys is about this quote specifically from Diana Taurasi, who said, "Look, reality is coming," to Scott Van Pelt on April 6th. "There's levels to this thing, and that's just life. We all went through it. You see it on the NBA side, and you're going to see it on this side. You look superhuman playing against 18-year-olds, but you're going to be playing against some grown women that have been playing professional basketball for a long time." End quote. Now, this was kind of the first welcome to the league nod for Caitlin Clark. Is this the reason why she's getting a little beat up out there?
Look, no, definitely not. And I actually think this was a word of advice from somebody who had gone through it. I mean, that with Diana Taurasi, when she came into the league, had very much the same kind of hype. Now, it didn't draw the same kind of eyes because we were living in a much different world 20 years ago. But I think that was more, I've been there, I've done that. You're going to have to go through this if you want to actually be considered an all-time great, like people are just trying to hand to you. And why is this a big deal? This is what happens in all sports. A rookie comes in and they go through the paces. They're put through the paces. They have to deal with the hard fouls and stuff. So I don't think this is A, that didn't start anything, and B, I think that this is getting very overblown for multiple reasons.
But is DT complicit in a way for Caitlin Clark's treatment so far?
That's just Diana Taurasi, dude.
Well, let me answer. Is the White Mamba complicit for this? No, not by any means necessary. I agree with Espo, even though that's not, the tradition of Southwest Bias to agree with our co-host, but
or with me at all.
The foreshadowing, the advice. I mean, on not that same broadcast, but during the women's NCAA tournament, Kelsey Plum said that DT offered her welcome to the WNBA moment with kind of a gut check, right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of more in line with, I think, what Caitlin Clark should experience. What she's experiencing in reality is unfortunate. I mean, what Kennedy Carter did for the Chicago Sky, there's always some people who go way too far and tried to make a name for herself. I think she wanted to kind of join her teammate, Angel Reese, and kind of being like the Draymond Green of the WNBA, where she looked more like Pat Bev. Like Angel Reese, like she's done a great job playing that villain role, right? But Kennedy Carter went way overblown, and the unfortunate victim is right now the first-year face of the WNBA and Caitlin Clark.
But I will say, the possession before, right? Yeah. Like right before, Caitlin Clark threw an elbow. Yeah. She was calling her all sorts of names on the other end. And listen, like, you're going to have a target on your back. Like, that's just the way that it goes, especially if you're being treated as the only reason why people are paying attention to women's basketball, which is completely incorrect. Now, as far as nationalizing, getting a lot of other eyes in there, of course, Caitlin Clark's been massive at growing the game. But listen, the W's had loyal followers and loyal fans for a very long time. And now it's expanding to a wider audience. And I don't think any of this comes from a place of jealousy. Right? It's not like, oh man, Caitlin. I don't think so. I think it just comes from a place of competitive nature.
Now, hold on. Like, if you want to go back to that game and in those moments, right? You have Kennedy Carter, who, in away from the basketball foul, right?
Yeah.
Is on an inbounds, where Caitlin Clark, within, as seconds are ticking off the clock, they're in the heat of battle. Kennedy Clark, who went to social media that said, all Caitlin Clark does is shoot threes, but she's trying to set a tone of physicality. Like, what is it? Does she need to be knocked down, or is she just a 3-point shooter?
I think part of this, though, too, is that meme, the F around and find out, right? If you talk that much crap as a rookie, sometimes you're going to get those kind of moments that happen against you as well. I mean, hell, if you're new in any profession and you walk in and you act like you're the biggest thing ever, you're going to piss off coworkers. Yeah. And I think that's part of the reality here. But I also think the media is in part to blame because they've done Caitlin Clark no favors by treating it as if she was the only person coming in to the league this year that was going to have an impact, or that those that came before her didn't have that kind of impact in helping to build the game. So yes, well, she's been a lightning rod and has helped raise ratings. I don't think creating her as the one and only storyline and the great white hope in this league was fair to her in the first place.
Yeah, and I mean, even back to what Taurasi said, like, it wasn't out of line. It was, you're going to need to adjust, right? And she even doubled down on it later, saying, quote, the new fans are really sensitive these days. You can't say anything. When it was the Phoenix Mercury media availability, said it's kind of like when you go from kindergarten to first grade. There's a learning adjustment. When you go from high school to college, that's a learning adjustment. I don't think I said anything that wasn't factually correct. Like anything, greatness is going to translate. And she's proven that in every level, and I don't see that being any different in the WNBA. Like, she wasn't saying, oh, it's not going to translate. It's just, it needs time. And it did take a couple games for Caitlin Clark, and then, of course,
can we talk about like tough physical play and cheap shots?
Yeah,
like we can all agree that the away from the basketball, it was a cheap shot play. Like
but can we not act like that doesn't happen in every other sport though? Cheap shots happen in the NBA. We've seen it. You brought up Pat Bev. Mm-hmm. It happens in the NHL constantly. We've seen it in the playoffs. Like, it's not a unique problem to the WNBA. That's the thing to me. It's all getting blown out of proportion.
Like, quit grasping your pearls on what happens.
Oh my God!
The entire landscape of sports. Sure, I agree with that.
It's sports.
Mm-hmm. At the same time, too, it's like you look at the NBA, and what are people begging for? Oh, bring back more physicality. We want somebody to clothesline.
But we don't want Bill Lambier in like the late 80s.
No, but some people do. That's the thing. Some people do want that. Some people are like, oh, you can't even set a hard screen anymore. And like, the NBA is probably too far in one direction. But to, like, the W's been like this. Like, this is not like Caitlin Clark came in the league and all of a sudden there's this level of physicality only directed at her. And it's not even just been her this entire season. Rookies get thrown around. And plus, in the W, it's a smaller league, less teams. The talent level from 1 to 12 on the roster is higher. I mean, heck, you have top round rookies getting cut before they even play. Like, it's an extremely competitive league, and there's not a lot of spots there. So people play really hard. And if anything, like, that should be celebrated. I'm not saying, hey, cheap shots are great. Go make cheap shots, whatever. Like, obviously what Kennedy Clark did was bad. Like, you should not do that. But at the same time, like, that physicality is what people have been begging for in the men's game.
Can we at least admit, though, I mean, DT is elite as she's on the court. She's an elite in stirring the pot. Correct. There is a bit of a bias here because Iowa wins in, a controversial fashion over her beloved UConn Huskies, and she's a Paige Beckers fan to start with. That she's maybe even being verbally tougher on Caitlin Clark than necessary?
Maybe, but she also, if somebody point blank asks her anything, she's going to give her honest take. Yeah. She was point blank asked about it. It wasn't like she went out of her way to find some microphones and say this. Dan Patrick point blank asked her about Caitlin Clark. She gave her honest answer. I don't hold that against anybody. Actually, I appreciate it because we want athletes to be real. We want them to be honest. And then half the time when they are, we jump down their throats. No, kudos to Diana Taurasi for doing that. It was fantastic. And kudos to Caitlin Clark for going out there. There's just one thing that will stop this, though. The next time it happens, her teammates have to stand up for her, and that will stop this, because if it looks like that this is going to lead to some giant fight, the league will crack down, or people will stop picking on Caitlin Clark if that's really what's happening.
It reminded me of Suns game where Jordan Farmer for the Lakers went after a couple Suns players, and you could just tell what his Lakers teammates thought about him. They just walked a different direction. it's a way different. Obviously, Clark's star is a lot brighter, and at some point, maybe her teammates aren't used to that. I mean, they will wise up now going forward. But as far as the game of WNBA Clue, like who done it? I mean, DT on the watch-along program with the shade thrown at Caitlin Clark is not complicit.
No, listen, and because it's also not like Diana Taurasi's the only person out here who's throwing elbows into rookies. Right, like that's not.
She hasn't even done anything.
No,
she hasn't played Caitlin yet, so like
that will be a great game
fault.
when that happens, though. Right? No, it's not her fault, and I think yes, like media plays into it, and I think it's great the covers of the W is getting, but it's kind of that double-edged sword that a lot of people are recognizing, where you realize how toxic like conversation is about the NBA, right? And how it's like one person does one thing wrong and automatically they're the villain for the next 5 years, right? Like the overreactions and the either clutching pearls or saying it's not enough, like, you know, that comes with the more like mainstream media coverage. So the question is, this whole saga, right, with Caitlin Clark and the physicality and who did it and who started it, is this overall going to pay dividends for Caitlin Clark in the long run? Do you think this will help her forge in the fire, or do you think that this is going to hurt?
I think it'll help her, and it's helping the WNBA.
Oh, yeah.
People are talking about it. There is an excitement and discussion. It's forcing people like Stephen A. Smith to get called out on his own program for the lack of talk about women's sports. You know, like I think this is all good for the W and good for Caitlin Clark in the long run.
When you're building a business, like sometimes like things are never perfect. Things get ugly.
We know.
And this is an ugly. Yeah, us here at PHNX, we know firsthand that things can get a little off, little ugly, a little iffy. And I think that the WNBA is going through, you know, a quick growth spurt that they're a little sore from right now. And unfortunately, their new star is paying the price. I'm like, it's great to see that the WNBA All-Star Game is sold out, but is it just going to turn into Royal Rumble?
I mean, that'd be fun.
The skills competition. They'll have a cage match. It'll be fun.
It's Angel Reese's music.
Oh my God, Caitlin Clark out with a chair. Like that's what people are acting like the W, and it's not.
And that's also the thing.
It's one outlier play. I think.
Yeah, and even that play in itself, like it's not one that's so egregious you can't think of 100 other that have happened in sports, right? Yeah. It's not like she picked her up and body slammed her on the ground or pushed her midair like it was dangerous. It was a cheap shot, and it shouldn't be condoned, but you can't cry about
Reese
it for
got
weeks.
Body slammed the week previous to that.
Yeah, it happens. It happens in professional sports, and even like a sport like basketball, people kind of underrate how physical it is, especially down low, and everybody kind of throwing elbows, and you know, you just don't really pick that up through the TV screen. Football, it's easy. You see somebody running, another guy gets hit. Wow, that was physical, right? But for basketball, it's a little bit different. And so I think people are just more tuned in and they're a little bit shocked about what's happening. But if you want to be more tuned to this Phoenix Mercury season, you can check out the PHNX Mercury show that happens twice a week. Plus, we have a Mercury takeover as well. Go to gophnx.com to check that out. You can also check out Bo Brock on the PHNX Cardinals show live 5 days out of the week at 4:30 on this very channel. And then Espo, also on the PHNX Suns podcast, also 5 days out of the week live at 3 o'clock. But other than that, this was the first.
You're not going to give yourself. You can find White Noise at White Noise a week on the Sun Devils.
That's true. PHNX Sun Devils. You can follow all of that at PHNX Sports and go from there. And until next time, this was the first edition of Southwest Bias. So we'll be back, and there will be fights.
Get that stuff out of here. It's Southwest Bias.